safety clip, and then taking apart the case and removing the amount of explosive that was there.
But as the squad continued their task, the bomber expanded his operation. 7 more menacing letters were sent to Tesco customers' homes.
These were letters that identified that they'd been followed home, that Sally knew that they were Tesco's customers and that they may be subject to further threats or bombs through the post.
I realised that things become a lot more serious and that the extortionists were saying to us, you know, I've told you I can do this, I've done it, now give me the money.
It was quite a shock, really, to think that the person that was responsible had actually gone to the next step. By actually sending devices, he's really sort of upping the stakes and making it an awful lot more serious.
As Tesco tried to reassure their customers, the police decided to issue a wider public warning.
We're advising members of the public to be extremely vigilant and exercise caution regarding any suspicious or unaccepted packages they receive.
Meanwhile, the bomb squad were placed on 24-hour standby.
The likelihood of needing a bomb squad to be positioned in Bournemouth to respond to threats made by an extortionist is unique. The only time we ever have the bomb squad station in Dorset is when we have a political party conference.
As the police braced themselves for further attacks, they placed 2 more personal ads in the Echo, begging the bomber to get in touch. But while they still didn't know who they were dealing with, a new theory about the bomber began to take shape.
Although Tesco's is a national company, the demand was made against a local Tesco store. We had a fire in a local post box. The demand was that club cards were placed in the local Bournemouth Echo, and as far as I was concerned, the offender was likely to be local to me.
To explore this theory, detectives called in a specialist unit.
A geographic profiler tries to help the police focus their inquiries by working out where the offender lives. And we do that by analysing the crimes or series of crimes that the individual has committed. Criminals are no different to everyday Joe public. Your geography is inherent in you and what you do. You build up what we call a mental map. What happens with criminals, they tend to commit crime within areas they have familiarity with.
The team logged all the crime scenes, including the newsagents, the site of the explosion, and the burned-out postbox. The locations were analysed by computer, which produced an area of focus. The results appeared to support the detectives' hunch.
We ended up with an area profile of probably just over a mile square, in and around where they had the postbox and the newsagent. Those are the areas that we suggested that they focus their inquiries.
Any suspect living within the catchment zone became a target for surveillance.
There were employees with links to people called Sally. There were individuals with links to the store at Ferndown where the letters were being sent. And we had to consider all of these possibilities.
But DSI James was convinced that one location above all would lead him to the bomber.
I always thought that we would catch Sally through the postbox at Bradpole Road. He'd used it at the beginning of September. I was convinced that Sally would go back to that postbox again.
Undercover officers placed the postbox under filmed surveillance.
We use various sorts of methods, workmen doing different things, which hopefully didn't draw attention to us. The golden rule of surveillance is you cannot make yourself invisible. No one's invisible. You're going to be seen. It's whether you're noticed.
With the surveillance operation underway, police now asked Tesco to consider a strategy that would only be used if the bombings escalated.
The police request came in that, well, we need to consider putting these cards in the Bournemouth Echo as a fallback position in case things get to that stage.
the company's head of security was less than enthusiastic.
My concern really was, is someone going to get seriously injured here? Is our reputation going to be damaged? Are we going to lose a lot of money by the decisions that I'm agreeing to?
But the police had good reason to believe that this tactic might work. In the mid-1990s, blackmailer Edgar Pierce had carried out a similar extortion campaign against Barclays Bank and supermarket giant Sainsbury's. The so-called Mardi Gras bomber had also insisted on receiving his cash through ATMs. But he was caught after police put hundreds of them under round-the-clock surveillance.
Our policy is that we wouldn't pay any extortionist, but that we would certainly support a police operation which meant going along and paying money in a controlled fashion. That's something that we would certainly consider.
In mid-October, as Tesco evaluated the police request, the bomber issued a new threat.
Sally explained that he was fed up with our stalling, he felt that we needed to get on and meet his demands, and he described the new generation of device. This was to be a pipe bomb that he would place in a garden of a Tesco's customer, and it would be capable of killing people. We naturally consulted with the bomb squad.
Our assessment was that, if he's capable of making the devices that we'd encountered so far, he was going to be more than capable of taking the next step to produce a pipe bomb. The difference being the devices he previously made were unconfined low explosives, so they were only ever going to burn. Once you encase low explosives in something like a metal pipe, you actually then get an explosion that will produce fragmentation, and now people will be injured and potentially killed.
But while the bomber's letter gave no indication when or where the device would be planted, it provided a new way for the police to talk to him in detail about his demands.
Sally actually sent a 3-part cipher code which would allow us to communicate with him.
Unlike the personal ads that could be read by anyone, the code allowed the police to send a detailed message hidden within a seemingly random sequence of letters. Detectives could now clearly explain why the bomber's ATM plan was unworkable.
It was quite a complex and a lengthy way of doing it, but it ensured that we could communicate with him without other people knowing about it. I came up with the idea of the pretext that it was a Mensa puzzle, and that it in fact would appear in several different adverts in the Daily Echo.
To ensure that the message ran without a hitch, DSI James contacted the newspaper's editor.
Phil actually said to me, look, I need to speak to you down here at the station, and nobody must know that we're actually meeting.
Thanks for coming, Stella.
He basically told me how Sally and the police had actually been communicating through the classified sections of the Daily Echo. I mean, I was gobsmacked, but absolutely fascinated. And then he came up with the big bombshell about wanting to work with the paper to actually get specific messages across to Sally.
Butterworth would be required to keep the operation secret from even his most trusted staff.
The issue for me was I had to explain to an advertising manager and a general manager why we were putting free adverts in the paper, what they were, without giving too many details away.
But within days of the coded message appearing in the paper, there was a dramatic breakthrough. Police traced the bomber's latest letter back through the postal system to the box at Bradpole Road. The Tesco Bomber had been captured on camera. For 2 months, the Tesco Bomber had been waging his campaign of terror. His latest letter threatened to plant a lethal pipe bomb in the garden of one of the store's customers. But in sending it, the bomber had blundered. He'd used the same postbox in Bradpole Road which the police had placed under filmed surveillance.
We managed to establish the times at which the box was emptied, so we knew that the letter had been posted in that box.
By this time, I've got surveillance officers down there. I've got CCTV covering that postbox.
Officers retrieved the surveillance footage, convinced the Tesco Bomber would soon be unmasked.
It's a very dark night. It's raining very heavily. There's a lot of traffic on the road. And it proves virtually impossible to identify any of the posters of letters in that postbox during that period.
Well, I think the comment was, can't you blow it up a bit? Enhance it for me. And of course, you can only work with what you've got. If the image initially is poor, you get a bigger, poorer image.
What had seemed so promising had turned out to be useless. After thousands of hours of patient police work, the bomber's identity remained a mystery.
You've got to imagine we're months into this inquiry. We've had the opportunity and nearly got Sally. This was a very difficult time for the inquiry and the team that were working on it.
Desperate for a breakthrough, officers sent Sally a new coded message asking him to agree to a money drop rather than collecting his cash through ATM machines. If he agreed, officers would be waiting for him. But Sally sensed the trap.
He was steadfast in the fact that he only wanted the technical demands that he'd said, and he never believed that we couldn't actually meet his demands. He always thought we were stalling, so it became very difficult to persuade him otherwise.
After this exchange, the bomber's letters stopped.
We weren't sure if our messages were getting through to Sally. As a consequence of that, we were concerned that the device might be exploded.
But 3 weeks later, the bomber finally got back in touch. His patience was running out.
Sally had provided a deadline. He'd said we had until Saturday, the 12th of December. He also referred to an A to Z map of Bournemouth.
In less than a month, the pipe bomb would be planted. In time, Sally would issue a grid reference for its location. With the deadline approaching, police considered activating their last-ditch strategy, issuing the modified ATM cards. But catching the bomber as he used them would be a massive undertaking.
We were looking at, I think, 25,000 ATM sites in the UK and about 250 in the conurbation. It was a huge operation potentially for us, one that would involve the National Crime Squad, not an operation that Dorset could have performed on its own.
But although there might be thousands of ATMs across the country for the bomber to choose from, Tesco were determined not to make it easy for him.
We could let 3 or 4 be used, but then put a stop on all the cards. Despite all his planning, he would have had to have been lucky to have got away with it.
As Tesco commenced the huge task of producing 50,000 cash cards, police surveillance was beefed up.
I was determined that we would have really good coverage of that postbox, and in fact we had 7 cameras. I had cameras just on top of the postbox. I had a fisheye camera in the newsagent's window, and I had other cameras covering the road.
But as the police continued their stakeout, news came that the cards could not be produced before the December the 12th deadline. Detectives tried to buy some time.
That was the basis of our communication with Sally. We are trying to work with you, but we cannot meet your demands by the deadline you've given us. We're really keen to move that deadline forward.
But a full week before the deadline was due to expire, the bomber got tired of waiting.
He had actually deployed a bomb in somebody's garden. He provided a grid reference to show where he had placed that bomb. Unfortunately, that grid reference covered a square kilometre and in fact 19 roads and 5